So in my last video, we discussed how our identity is akin to the role that we are playing in a game, like how someone might have an identity of the catcher or the pitcher in the game of baseball. But how does this relate to the church and the gospel? Well, the gospel describes the ultimate game that we are all playing. It's the great cosmic drama that all other games are nested in. That is what religious claims are. The plan of salvation lays out the game and why the rules of the game exist. So with this in mind, are we really free to choose our identity? Well, sort of. We can choose whatever we want to be. We can choose to reject the plan of salvation and the doctrines of the church and go off and play a different game. But the fundamental Christian message is that God is calling all of us to play His game, because it is the only game that leads us to an eternal, perfect relationship with one another and with God. God is asking us to allow all our other identity labels to be made subservient to the part we are called to play in the plan of salvation. To recognize that ultimately, all our games are nested within His game. This rendering subservient of all of our sub-identities to this fundamental identity as children of God was the subject of a recent discussion that I had with Latter-day Saint writer Dan Ellsworth.
There's a liberal theologian named Richard Rohr, and he drives a lot of people crazy. Sometimes he drives me crazy too. But sometimes he says things that are really that I really like. And he calls Christianity an identity transplant. Like whatever your identity was before, when you have an experience with God and a conversion experience, it's an identity transplant. However you regarded yourself before, it pales in comparison to this new identity.
Yeah, that's an interesting way of putting it, because think about it. We're to be born again.
Yeah.
We're to take upon ourselves the name of Christ.
Yep.
If these are all statements about identity.
Yep.
What we are facing in the church today are false identity labels. False because they do not describe a role within the plan of salvation. When a person says that they're a demi-boy or a trans man, they are confused about who they are. Same-sex attraction and gender dysphoria are a description of sexual proclivity or self-perception. They are not descriptions of identity and should not be made into such. God and His plan of salvation determines who we are and what roles we play. Notions of identity that conflict with His plan and purposes should be abandoned as we are swallowed up in our identity as children of Christ. For instance, what does it mean to be a man or a woman, or married, or any of it, without understanding why those things were created in the first place? When the Pharisees came tempting Jesus with questions about marriage, He reminded them about the purpose for the creation of male and female. He said, "Haven't you read that at the beginning the Creator made them male and female? And for this reason, a man will leave his father and mother and be united to his wife, and the two will become one flesh? So they are no longer two, but one flesh. Therefore, what God has joined together, let no one separate." You see, God is the one who created and ordained these roles within His plan. The Family Proclamation outlines the details of where our gender and sexual nature fit into the plan of salvation, which is the fundamental game that we all chose to be part of in the pre-existence. Now, some people will simply reject this and leave the church, but others are actively working in the church desperately to reimagine and redefine and alter the plan of salvation and the doctrines of the restoration in order to try and accommodate popular identity labels. Now, I don't believe people want to change our doctrine out of malice. I believe they do so because they are dealing with trauma. Same-sex attraction and gender dysphoria are among the greatest trials that human beings can be afflicted with. It is incredibly difficult confronting how unfair this fallen world is. And people struggle with this either themselves or they watch those who they love the most struggle with this. And they did not choose this trial and they don't deserve it. But that is the nature of the fallen world. But praise God for the gospel that we preach. It's called the good news for a reason. And in my next video, I'll explain why, and why we all, no matter what our afflictions, fit into the plan of salvation. If you enjoyed this video, give it a like and hit the subscribe button. Also, if you want more content, including the podcast, go to thoughtful-faith.com. Thanks for watching.